Hello and welcome to your ultimate guide for the C168 OA, Critical Thinking and Logic course. My goal today is simple: give you everything you need to fully understand the key concepts, master them, and walk into your C168 OA exam with total confidence. In this video we'll cover critical thinking, core concepts, mind's functions, reasoning elements and intellectual standards. And remember, our website offers free exam guides and practice questions to help you ace your C168 OA exam. You'll find the link in the description below, so be sure to check it out and get the resources you need to study smarter, not harder. So let's dive right in. Let's begin with the absolute foundation. What even is critical thinking? The experts Richard Paul and Linda Elder give us a beautifully simple starting point. They say critical thinking is the art of thinking about your thinking, while you're thinking, in order to make your thinking better. This means it's not a passive activity, it's an active, ongoing process of self-reflection and improvement. Imagine you're trying to build a piece of furniture for the time. You wouldn't just start sawing wood randomly. You'd follow a plan, you'd measure your cuts, you'd check your angles, and if something didn't fit, you'd stop and think about why it didn't fit before continuing. Critical thinking is applying that same level of deliberate quality control to your mental processes. This breaks down into three core interlocking activities. First, you must analyze your thinking, which means breaking it down into its basic component parts, like a mechanic disassembling an engine, to understand how each piston and valve contributes to the whole. Second, you must evaluate your thinking. This is the inspection phase. You examine those component parts for strengths and weaknesses, asking, is this part of my reasoning solid or is it flawed? Third, and most crucially, you must improve your thinking. Based on your evaluation, you actively reconstruct your thought process to make it more logical, more sound, and less prone to error. The ultimate goal is to move from being an unconscious thinker, driven by habit and gut reaction, to a conscious, self-directed thinker. We all carry around a suite of unhelpful mental habits. These include making vast generalizations from a single experience, like having one bad meal at a restaurant and declaring the entire establishment is terrible. Or letting a stereotype, a mental shortcut, dictate how we perceive a person before they've even spoken. Another bad habit is viewing the world from a single, fixed vantage point, unable to see an issue from any other perspective. Critical thinking is the disciplined work of identifying these built-in flaws and consciously choosing a more rigorous path. Before we dive deep into our first major concept, I want to let you know about something that's going to be incredibly valuable for your exam preparation. I've created over 300 completely free practice questions that work hand in hand with everything we're covering in this comprehensive guide. You'll find the link in the description, and I really encourage you to bookmark it because these questions will help you apply every concept we discussed today. Now, to truly grasp this, we must understand a foundational distinction you are guaranteed to encounter on your exam: the difference between first-order thinking and second-order thinking. First-order thinking is our default, automatic pilot mode. It's the spontaneous, non-reflective thinking that gets us through the day. It's a messy, unfiltered stream of consciousness where genuine insights swim alongside ingrained prejudices. Moments of good reasoning are mixed with lazy assumptions. For example, you receive an email with an urgent-sounding subject line from a brand you recognize, claiming your account has a security issue and you must click a link to fix it. The first-order thinking is an immediate jolt of panic and an impulse to click the link to solve the problem quickly. It's a reaction, not a reasoned response. Second-order thinking is the voice of the critical thinker stepping in. It is the conscious, deliberate act of hitting the pause button and analysing that first-order impulse. It is thinking that is consciously realised, examined, and assessed. The second-order thinker sees that same email and thinks, wait a minute, is this a legitimate email? Does the sender's address look right? Reputable companies usually don't ask for credentials via email links. I'll go directly to their official website to check my account status instead of clicking this link. This is the second layer of thought that critiques and directs the first. This distinction leads directly into another crucial pair of concepts: weak sense versus strong sense critical thinking. This is all about the motive behind your reasoning. A person can be highly skilled in logic and argumentation, but use those skills for purely selfish, manipulative purposes. This is weak sense critical thinking. Think of a brilliant but unethical salesperson who knows all the logical fallacies and psychological triggers to pressure someone into buying a product they don't need. They aren't seeking truth. They are using the tools of reason as a weapon to achieve their goal. They skillfully ignore flaws in their own sales pitch while exploiting the emotional weaknesses in their customers' thinking. Strong sense critical thinking, in contrast, is the application of these same powerful skills with an ethical, fair-minded commitment to truth. A strong sense thinker uses logic as a tool for mutual understanding and discovery. Imagine a city planner leading a community meeting about a controversial new development. The strong sense thinker would not just present their own side, but would actively listen to and fairly represent the concerns of the residents, even those who passionately disagree. They are willing to modify their own plan when someone else presents a superior argument, because their goal isn't to win, it's to find the best possible solution for the entire community. On your exam, you'll see scenarios and need to identify the thinking style. The absolute key is to look at the underlying purpose. Is the person trying to dominate, manipulate, and win? That's weak sense. Are they trying to understand, collaborate, and find the truth? That's strong sense. What we just covered about weak sense and strong sense critical thinking is exactly the type of material you'll find in our free practice question bank. These aren't just basic questions either. They're designed to test your deep understanding, just like the real OA exam will. To evolve into that strong sense critical thinker, we must become experts on the internal machinery of our own minds. The mind constantly performs three basic, deeply interconnected functions: thinking, feeling, and wanting. Thinking is the cognitive function. It's the storyteller in your head. It's the part that makes sense of the world by creating meaning, identifying patterns, and judging what's happening around you. Feeling is the emotional function. It acts as a monitor, constantly evaluating the stories your thinking function is telling you. It attaches an emotion, positive or negative, to that story, telling you how you should be feeling about what's going on. Wanting is the motivational function. It's the engine that drives you to act. It allocates your energy based on the combination of what you are thinking and feeling, telling you what goals are worth pursuing and what is worth avoiding. These three functions are in a constant dynamic dance. Let's use a more complex example. Imagine you are a student and you get a C on a midterm exam you studied hard for. Your immediate thinking function might generate the thought, "This is a disaster. The professor is a harsh grader, and I'm clearly not smart enough for this subject." Immediately, your feeling function responds to this catastrophic story and generates feelings of deep disappointment, anxiety, and even anger. This powerful emotional response then fuels your wanting function. You might want to drop the course to avoid further failure, or want to complain to a friend about how unfair the professor is. A critical thinker learns to skillfully intervene in this destructive chain reaction right at the source, the initial thought. They challenge that first, unanalyzed thought. They might ask, is "this is a disaster" really true? A C is not a failing grade. Instead of "I'm not smart enough," how about "my study methods were not effective for this type of exam"? By consciously reframing the initial thought, the entire sequence changes. The new thought, "I need to change my study strategy," leads to a different feeling, perhaps not joy but determination and a sense of agency. This new feeling then powers a different want, the want to visit the professor during office hours, to analyse the mistakes on the exam, and to form a study group. This self-regulation is the gateway to fair-mindedness. Fair-mindedness is the difficult, daily struggle to consider all relevant viewpoints equally, without being swayed by our own ego, selfish desires, or the biases of our social group. It requires developing intellectual virtues like intellectual humility, the ability to say "I don't know," or "I might be wrong," and intellectual empathy, the ability to genuinely inhabit another person's perspective and understand why it makes sense to them, even if you disagree. For your exam, be on the lookout for scenarios where an individual's conclusion is clearly being driven by an unexamined emotional reaction or self-interest. That represents a failure of fair-mindedness. To remember the connection, think of the acronym TFW. Thinking, feeling, wanting. Master your thinking, and you will master the other two. Now that we have the proper mindset, let's get our hands on the actual toolkit. We're going to dive deep into the 8 elements of reasoning. Think of these as the fundamental, universal components of all structured thought. Every act of reasoning, from deciding what to eat for lunch to a Supreme Court justice writing an opinion, is composed of these 8 parts. Learning to identify them gives you a powerful framework to deconstruct any argument and see its strengths and weaknesses. The 8 elements are purpose, question at issue, information, inferences, concepts, assumptions, implications, and point of view. We will use a single detailed example to explore them all. Imagine a school board is debating a controversial proposal to replace traditional textbooks with digital tablets for all students. First, every line of reasoning has a purpose. What is the goal? The stated purpose of the proposal is to improve student engagement and provide more up-to-date educational materials. However, there may be other, less obvious purposes. A technology company might have the purpose of securing a large contract. A politician on the board might have the purpose of appearing modern and forward-thinking to voters. Understanding the purpose is the first step in evaluation. Second, all reasoning seeks to answer a question at issue. Here, the main question is, should our school district invest in tablets to replace physical textbooks? But a good critical thinker sees that this big question is made up of many smaller ones. What is the total cost of implementation, including training and maintenance? What is the pedagogical evidence supporting the use of tablets over books? How will this impact students without reliable home internet access? Third, all reasoning is based on information. This is the data, the evidence. For this debate, the board would need to gather information like academic studies on learning outcomes with tablets, cost-benefit analyses from other districts, quotes from tech vendors, and surveys of teachers and parents. The quality of reasoning is only as good as the quality of its information. Fourth, from information we draw inferences. An inference is a conclusion you reach based on the evidence. For example, after reading a study that shows a modest increase in test scores in a similar district, a board member might infer implementing tablets will likely lead to better academic performance for our students. Inferences are the mental steps we take from evidence to conclusion. Fifth, all reasoning is shaped by concepts. These are the big ideas or theories we are using. In our tablet debate, crucial concepts include digital literacy, educational equity, student engagement, and fiscal responsibility. The entire debate can shift based on how different people define and prioritise these core concepts. Sixth, all reasoning rests upon assumptions. These are the beliefs we take for granted as true to allow us to begin our reasoning. The board might be assuming that teachers will have enough time and resources to be properly trained. They might be assuming that the technology won't be obsolete in 3 years. They might be assuming that screen time has no negative health effects on children. Unstated and unexamined assumptions are often the weakest point in an argument. Seventh, all reasoning leads to implications. These are the logical consequences of our reasoning and decisions. The implications of adopting tablets include not just the potential for improved learning, but also the need for new IT support staff, potential for student distraction, and the creation of a digital divide between students. Finally, all reasoning is expressed from a particular point of view. A veteran teacher nearing retirement will have a very different point of view than a young tech-savvy teacher. A parent concerned about their child's screen time will have a different point of view than a parent who is excited about the technological resources. A strong-sense critical thinker makes an active effort to seek out, understand, and consider all of these relevant points of view. I know we're covering a lot of detailed information, and you might be wondering how to practice applying all these concepts. That's precisely why I put together those 300 plus free practice questions I mentioned earlier. They'll help you work through problems that combine multiple concepts, just like you'll see on the actual exam. So if the 8 elements are the parts of the thinking engine, our next topic, the 9 intellectual standards, is the comprehensive quality control checklist you use to inspect that engine. These are the universal criteria we apply to our reasoning to determine if it is sound and rigorous. You must apply these standards to the elements to find out if your thinking is high quality. Let's explore each one with a failure and success example. The first standard is clarity. Can it be easily understood? Failure. A manager tells their team, we need to leverage our core competencies to create more value-added synergies. This is corporate jargon that is vague and unclear. Success. The manager says, I need the marketing team and the product team to meet twice a week to share ideas on our new product launch. This is crystal clear. The second is accuracy. Is it true? Can it be verified? Failure. A website claims, this supplement is proven to cure the common cold, but provides no links to any scientific studies. This is an inaccurate, unverified claim. Success. A health report states, according to a double-blind, peer-reviewed study published in the New England Journal of Medicine, this treatment was shown to reduce symptoms by 20% compared to a placebo. This is accurate because it is verifiable. Third is precision. Could it be more specific and detailed? Failure. A friend tells you, I'll be there soon. This is not precise. Success. Your friend says, I'm 10 minutes away and will arrive at your house at exactly 6:15 p.m. This is highly precise. Fourth is relevance. Does it directly relate to the issue at hand? Failure. In a debate about climate change policy, a politician begins talking about a completely unrelated economic issue to distract from the topic. This is irrelevant. Success. In the same debate, a scientist presents data on rising sea levels. This is highly relevant. Fifth is depth. Does it address the complexities, or is it superficial? Failure. A person says, the reason for crime is that people are just bad. This is an incredibly superficial explanation for a complex societal problem. Success. A sociologist writes a book exploring the multiple, interconnected factors contributing to crime rates, including poverty, education, mental health services, and policing strategies. This has depth. Sixth is breadth. Have you considered other relevant perspectives? Failure. A company designs a new app but only gets feedback from its 25-year-old engineers, ignoring how older adults or people with disabilities might use it. This lacks breadth. Success. The company conducts user testing with a diverse range of ages, backgrounds, and abilities to ensure the app is accessible and user-friendly for everyone. This shows breadth. Seventh is logic. Does it all make sense together? Do the conclusions follow from the evidence? Failure. An advertisement argues, successful people drive our luxury car. Therefore, if you buy our luxury car, you will become successful. This is a logical fallacy. It confuses correlation with causation. Success. An argument states all humans are mortal. Socrates is a human. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. This is a perfectly logical deduction. Eighth is significance. Is it focused on the most important aspects of the issue? Failure. During a performance review, a manager spends most of the time critiquing a single typo in a 50-page report and ignores the report's brilliant analysis. They are focusing on something that is not significant. Success. The manager briefly notes the typo but focuses the feedback on the significant strengths and weaknesses of the report's central argument. Finally, number 9 is fairness. Is the reasoning free from bias, self-interest, and deception? Failure. A political commentator presents their opponent's argument in a distorted, oversimplified way, a straw man, to make it easier to attack. This is unfair. Success. The commentator first accurately and charitably summarizes their opponent's position before beginning their critique. This is fair. If some of these more advanced concepts feel challenging right now, don't worry at all. That's completely normal, and it's exactly why I created that comprehensive practice question bank. Working through those problems will help solidify your understanding and build your confidence. Now we arrive at the master skill, the place where everything we've learned integrates into a single, powerful process. This is the art of applying the intellectual standards to the elements of reasoning. This is the practical, active work of critical thinking. You use the standards as a set of diagnostic tools to examine each element of an argument. Let's use a new, more complex case study. A city is proposing to build a new sports stadium, funded partially by a new tax on hotel rooms and restaurants. First, let's examine the element of purpose. The city government's stated purpose is to boost the local economy and create jobs. A team owner's purpose is to get a new facility and increase profits. A taxpayer's purpose might be to ensure their money is spent wisely. We can now apply the standard of fairness. Is the city's plan fairly balancing these competing purposes, or is it unfairly prioritising the interests of the wealthy team owner over the average citizen? Next, let's look at the element of information. The city presents a glossy report, funded by the team, projecting massive economic benefits. We must apply the standards of accuracy and relevance. Is this information accurate, or is it an overly optimistic marketing document? We need to look for independent, unbiased studies to verify these claims. Does the report conveniently leave out relevant information, like the negative economic impact on businesses not located near the stadium? Now consider the element of assumptions. The proposal rests on the assumption that building the stadium will automatically lead to a vibrant downtown area. We can apply the standard of logic. Is this assumption logical? We can look at other cities where stadiums were built. Did they all see an economic boom, or did some become vacant dead zones on non-game days? The assumption may be a logical leap rather than a sound conclusion. Finally, let's look at the element of implications. The implication of passing the new tax is that tourists and residents will pay more to dine out and stay in hotels. We can apply the standard of significance. How significant is this new tax? Will it be a minor inconvenience, or will it be significant enough to deter tourism and hurt local restaurant owners, potentially costing jobs and offsetting the gains from the stadium? By systematically applying the standards to the elements in this way, you can move beyond a simple "I'm for it" or "I'm against it" position and develop a deeply reasoned, well-supported, and nuanced conclusion. This is the skill that your OA will test most thoroughly. As we wrap up this detailed overview, remember that understanding these concepts is just the first step. The real mastery comes from applying them, which is where those 300+ free practice questions become invaluable. They're completely free and designed specifically for OA exam success. Finally, let's focus on how to use these powerful tools for systematic decision-making and problem-solving. It all begins with asking the right kind of questions. Paul and Elder provide an essential framework by sorting questions into 3 distinct categories. The first category is questions of fact. These have one correct, verifiable answer that exists within a single system of knowledge. What is the boiling point of water at sea level is a question of fact. There is a single correct answer. The second category is questions of preference. These have many possible answers based entirely on subjective individual choice. There is no right or wrong. Which musical genre do you enjoy the most? Is a question of preference. Any answer is valid for that individual. The third and most critical category is questions of judgment. These are complex questions that require reasoned consideration, are debatable, and may have multiple competing answers. However, and this is the most important part, some answers are demonstrably better than others, based on evidence and logic. What is the most effective and ethical public policy for reducing homelessness? Is a question of judgment. There isn't one simple answer, but an answer supported by economic data, sociological research, and clear ethical principles is far superior to one based on prejudice or simplistic assumptions. A huge error in thinking is to miscategorize these questions. Treating a question of judgment as a question of fact leads to dogmatism and the belief that there's only one right answer. Treating it as a question of preference leads to a lazy relativism, where all opinions are equally valid, which is simply not true. When a question of judgment involves figuring out cause and effect, we can turn to a brilliant set of logical tools developed by the philosopher John Stuart Mill. Let's imagine a real-world business problem. A successful e-commerce company notices that in the last quarter, their rate of customer returns has suddenly doubled. Why is this happening? We can use Mill's methods to investigate. First, the common factor method. We analyze the data from every single return product. Is there one thing they all have in common? We discover that 90% of the returned items came from a new supplier, supplier X. This is a strong clue. Second, the single difference method. We compare two groups of nearly identical products, like two batches of the same t-shirt model. Batch A came from our old reliable supplier, and it has a 2% return rate. Batch B came from the new supplier X, and it has a 40% return rate. The single significant difference between these two groups is the supplier. This reinforces our conclusion. Third, concomitant variation. This is looking for a pattern of two things varying together. We look at our records and see that as we increase the percentage of our inventory coming from supplier X each month, our customer return rate increased in almost perfect correlation. As one went up, the other went up. This suggests a causal link. Finally, the process of elimination. The team investigates other possibilities and rules them out. Did our shipping company change? No. Did we change the product descriptions on our website? No. Did we run a big sale that attracted less careful buyers? No. By systematically eliminating all other plausible causes, we are left with the most likely culprit. Supplier X is providing low-quality products. So let's take a moment and look back at the journey we've just taken. We started by defining the very essence of critical thinking, the art of thinking about your thinking to make it better. We uncovered the crucial difference between selfish, weak sense thinking and ethical, strong sense thinking. We explored the inner workings of our minds, the constant interplay of thinking, feeling and wanting, and how the ideal of fair-mindedness helps us overcome our natural egocentrism. Then we assembled our toolkit. We laid out the 8 essential elements of reasoning, the building blocks of all thought, like purpose, assumptions, and inferences. And we learned about our quality control system, the 9 intellectual standards like clarity, accuracy, and logic, which we use to evaluate those elements. Most importantly, we saw how the master skill is applying those standards to the elements to rigorously analyze any argument. Finally, we brought it all into the practical world, learning how to categorize questions into fact, preference, and judgment, and how to use systematic methods to determine the cause of a problem. Notice how it all connects. You can't develop a good answer to a question of judgment without carefully considering all the elements of your reasoning, and you have no way of knowing if your answer is any good without meticulously applying the intellectual standards to it. As you approach your OA exam, I want you to adopt this mindset. Don't just try to memorize definitions. Think like a detective, a scientist, a fair-minded judge. For every question you face, both on the exam and in life, get in the habit of asking, what is the purpose here? What question am I trying to answer? What are the key assumptions being made? Is the information accurate? Is the reasoning logical? Have I considered other points of view? This isn't about being a genius. It's about being disciplined, systematic, and honest in your thinking. You have learned the tools and the framework. You have everything you need to succeed. You can do this. Now the final step is to take all this knowledge and make it second nature. The absolute best way to do that is through active practice. Don't forget to grab those free practice questions from the link in the description. With the depth of knowledge you've gained today, plus the practice from those questions, you'll be incredibly well prepared for your OA exam. Go forward with confidence and think critically.